Hey guys. I talk a lot about restraint and enduring on this channel, and I notice that some people misunderstand the goal of this entire practice completely. They start to endure just for the sake of enduring. They restrain, but they do not renounce. Or in short, there is no joy arising in their practice. They completely miss the connection of their practice to the Four Noble Truths, to the ending of craving. Today, we try to understand where all of this restraint should naturally lead to, and what must be done to go beyond craving. But first, we want to talk a bit about non-activity and what non-activity even is. Well, it is rather simple. You could call it the ultimate form of restraint, where you deny your senses literally everything that they want. Normally, the senses, which includes the mind, always go after certain things, they lust after certain things. You sit down, and this is mandatory by the way, you can do it standing, lying, and whatever, and stop being active. You stop doing, stop choosing, stop black and white comma, so to speak. Whenever any impulse arises, you resist it and instead don't do anything at all. The Buddha described this kind of training in 3 stages, or on 3 levels of granularity. On the level of the body, on the level of speech, and lastly, on the level of the mind. First, when you do that kind of training, there is gross kind of lust, gross kind of hatred, and very gross distractions, and you need a lot of restraint of the body. On this level, you must simply learn to not physically follow your impulses. The mind will throw choices, possibilities, impulses here and there at you. There's very likely in the beginning not a moment where there's not a very strong pull in this or that direction. And when the prospect of lust or aversion arises, you simply do not go for it and, pull the leash on your senses or on your mind, however you want to call it. You resist the pull, which can be, to be honest, freakishly hard and requires a lot of gradual training, and you gain a lot of mental strength in return. While this is initially very painful and hard to do, there comes a time when the mind throws fewer and fewer, tantrums, and you feel more and more at ease, just as a default state, as a default mode of being. And next comes a level of speech, while you might have learned not to act physically out of your cravings and impulses, and this is, by the way, all the same, and already gained some distance, that is not enough. The next and more subtle level is that of speech. Speech is kinda special as it is an in-between thing between the body and the mind. We speak with a physical mouth, but are under the impression that it is our mental thoughts that come out into the world, that are placed from our mind into the physical realm, so to speak. So we are also restraining our impulses to speak based on craving and gain even more freedom in return. And every bit of freedom that we gain is something that feels very, very relieving, that feels very good. But it's not a orgasmic kind of pleasure. It's more subtle than that. It really is a feeling of peace, of ease, of being free. It is a bit like bigger and smaller waves vanishing from a pond, revealing smaller and smaller movements on the surface that were previously hidden by the bigger waves, so to speak. So whenever you restrain a very big area of your life and really get rid of the craving when it comes to that, you really renounce it, then it reveals smaller and smaller, more subtle and more subtle things that you can train on. And lastly, and the most subtle kind, is the level of the mind and the associated mental actions. Those are the most subtle and most difficult to resist. The gradual training aims at moving you to this point where you can start practicing on the mental level, where practice matters most. In the simplest sense, you want to learn to see craving directly as it happens and then resist it. You want to learn to be properly mindful, to resist the pull that the mind has on you. If left unchecked, it immediately becomes absorbed and lost in the next sense object or prospect, and you rein it in by keeping a wide and open awareness. You can only be in one mode of perception, so to speak, at a time, either very open or absorbed. And the Buddha also gave us a simile for the gradual training when it comes to this. It is a simile of purifying gold from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Threes, number 101, I believe. And he pretty much says, monks, there are gross defilements of gold, like soil, grit, and gravel. Now the soil remover, or his apprentice, washes, rinses, and cleans it. There are also middle and fine defilements, like fine grit and coarse sand and fine sand and black dust. And he smelts the gold afterwards, and the dross has been removed. So 2 monks, gross defilements, bodily, verbal, and mental misconduct, sensual thoughts, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of harming are to be removed first. Then thoughts about relation, thoughts about the country, and thoughts about the reputation. And then after that, there comes a time when his mind becomes internally steady, composed, unified, and concentrated. So this is also very important. The concentration is always the result of the entire training. If you leave a step before that out, what you have attained is not the concentration that the Buddha was talking about. Yeah, but anyway, the Buddha also explained the entire process of the gradual training, first starting with gross things, etc., to his son Rahula. And he said to him, Rahula, when you wish to do an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Would this action that I wish to perform with the body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect thus, if you know this action that I wish to do with the body would lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, then it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results. Then you definitely should not do such an action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I wish to do with the body would not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is an wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, with pleasant results, then you may do such an action with the body. And this is from Majjhima Nikaya number 61, which is a discourse that the Buddha has spoken to his son Rahula. I think it is called the Rahula Sutta, but I'm not sure there. The point is, you reflect before you do something, some action, you reflect while you are doing actions, and you reflect after you do actions. And you reflect in all three kinds of domains, namely with the body, with the speech, and with the mind. That is all content of the sutta. I have just abridged it a bit because it is a very long one. Even the middle length discourses that the Buddha gave tend to be quite long. But yeah. In the end, the entire practice revolves around the mental level that you want to, unlock by the prior practice, so to speak. You want to learn not to crave, as that is the single ultimate reason that you are suffering. There is no other reason. You crave against reality as it unfolds before you without any controlling self, and as a result you suffer. In the most ultimate sense, the Buddha defines suffering as being paired with what is disagreeable to you or not having what is agreeable to you. In the beginning of the training, a lot of restraint is necessary, but after a while you can indeed walk, move, and even speak without craving, without losing sight of the mind, so to speak. So initially, until you are accomplished in virtue, which is pretty much stream entry, then you can loosen the restraint a little bit, but in the beginning you should not do that. It is simply not a good idea, because you have no idea if it is enough restraint that you are having. And non-activity, now coming back to that, is a form of advanced restraint that targets the neutral feeling as a last barrier between you and the right view. The neutral feeling and our tendency to ignore it, to distract ourselves from it, is what obscures the vision of the Dhamma, the vision of the Four Noble Truths. We are constantly distracting ourselves from that, and as a result, we have no breakthrough to the Dhamma. And before that, we mainly tame the impulses of lust and aversion, which are much grosser, and the urge to distract ourselves is basically invisible, hidden behind lust and hate. But there comes a time when there is no gross lust or hate, but the mind still wants to do things, just for the sake of having something to do, for the sake of being relevant or something like that. And now it is time to train in regard to that neutral feeling, which is neither pleasant nor painful. So when you feel neither pleasant nor painful, it's very likely that there is a neutral feeling. If you also reveal that by restraint and train in regards to it, you remove the last hindrance, so to speak, towards the right view. Because the right view is the right view in regards to all three types of feelings. And the Buddha named that there are just three, namely good feeling, a bad feeling, and a neither good nor bad feeling. And you have to transcend and understand all of them. And the neutral feeling, as opposed to lust and aversion, is kind of special. It is neither good nor is it bad, yet the untrained mind experiences it as extremely pressuring and anxiety-inducing. This is why most people constantly need something to do. Even when they say that they want to do nothing or relax, that is a very active thing for them. They usually just do other things that they deem more agreeable, like sitting on a couch and watching something, or playing some video games, or eating something that they like. This is what they mean when they say they don't want anything. For a well-trained mind, the neutral feeling is the best thing ever, but that perception must be cultivated and trained. It does not start like that. The sutras even say that enlightenment is precisely pleasant because nothing is felt. That is what Sariputta said at some point. And the easiest way to get an inkling of what non-activity is like is probably through a kind of boredom meditation or a boredom experiment. Essentially, for a time, you simulate death, where you have no access to anything that you desire. It is a bit like solitary confinement in prison. Well, but you also let go of the anticipation of freedom afterwards. You simply sit somewhere, preferably unmoving, as even movement would be like having something to do. That is it. Be as undistracted as you can, be as passive as you can, but the pressure to act will likely be enormous, and there might even be existential dread. Such meditations question your entire existence as a self. Naturally, the self kind of dislikes it and feels annihilation. And the entire meditation essentially boils down to just dwelling or abiding without anything at all, without doing anything. And when the Buddha talks about meditation in the sutras, he essentially describes this approach. He never described a formal method. Never. Never any technique, never any special recipe that people must follow. Those are all doings that we try to relinquish in the end. While he did talk about sitting, that should better be understood as a byproduct of non-activity, as the body has to be in some posture, and sitting is the most inactive one. You literally just are. That is it. Doing nothing at all and are at perfect peace if you do it rightly. If you do not experience perfect peace while just sitting or just walking, then there is a problem, because that indicates very much that there is craving left in your experience. And this kind of meditation allows for the possibility of insight to arise as you make your experience more in line with how it really is. If you always act based on the three types of feelings, your experience is not like the Buddha described yet. Though, as there are two modes of being, you essentially sit and try to do nothing, but you will still likely notice, given the groundwork, namely virtue and all the other things, that things still happen. When the three impulses in regard to the three feelings are sufficiently weakened, you can realize and experience what experience without craving is like, and pull the root, so to speak, via understanding. Only a mind that has overcome the neutral feeling too can gain the spotless vision of the Dhamma or have the right view arise. In training like that, you withdraw more and more from the world of the senses and become unbound, untethered, unhindered, unfettered, unshackled, or whatever you want to say. You become free. The mind starts floating away even in some cases. It can move really high, and that is extremely scary for a mind that depends on sensual interaction. Yet for a tamed mind, that is the best thing, as nothing can touch you there. You are outside of the domain of Mara, the evil one, outside of the domain of death, outside of the domain of sickness and old age. Whatever happens to the body or to the mind, it is not yours, not you, and not for you any longer, and as a result you cannot suffer when anything happens to that. That state, a state without craving, is what jhana essentially is. Every description of the jhanas in the sutta starts with thoroughly secluded from sensuality and unwholesome states, and that means that you are withdrawn from craving, unmoved by it. Sensuality is immense lust, it's in the intentions. So when you still have intentions of lust in your day-to-day life that arise after the meditation, as an example, or before the meditation, then you are not thoroughly secluded. But when you had no lust for a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, I don't know, maybe even longer, it depends on the person how much it takes for them to dry off of sensuality, then jhana can arise. Literally no method is required to reach that state. One could even argue that every step-by-step plan is a hindrance to jhana, as jhana means having no goal, no ambition, none of that. If you do something to reach your jhana, it is not the jhana of the sutta. The sutta jhanas are attained by non-doing. It is a state of concentration, a negative quality. They are a supreme relief from something oppressive, and not a holiday from bad feelings or an orgasmic kind of pleasure. They are not an explosion, they are peace, no longer being pressured. Just imagine what a state without craving might be. It truly is the most sublime thing. There is nothing to be done, no pressure, no thing you must hunt after. However you abide, it is just the most perfect thing in the world. This state arises, so to speak, when the hindrances vanish. But please do not try to map this some kind of piti or sukha feeling. There is piti, so to speak, which is a relief-born joy. I like that word a lot. But most people think it is in the hand or in the body or in the face or in the eyes or whatever. They mistake it for a perception in the body. Piti is not a bodily sensation. Piti is mental. The Buddha is very clear about that in the suttas. Yet many modern traditions mistake that completely. They always say, yeah, piti is in the body. Yeah, I have to focus on a pleasant sensation in the body. You can do that, but that is not the piti that the suttas are talking about. While there is joy and peace and all those things, they are a byproduct of the jhana and become more and more neutral over time. If you have to repeat an experience and perform steps towards it, it's very likely not jhana. Jhana is beyond all of this. Godlessness, goallessness, desirelessness, perfect peace right here and now. The closest thing to the real Nibbana. In itself, still mundane, but by today's standards, with the teachings of the Buddha available, it is nearly impossible that you do not have the right view when you have attained a jhana. But anyway, this should be enough for today. Let us now come to the most important points. First, most practitioners think of restraint only in terms of lust and need. Yet the most important restraint happens on the level of the mind, and non-activity meditation, or scheduled non-activity, reveals the pressure of the neutral feeling, or the pressure of boredom. You first weaken lust and hatred sufficiently until you can see the neutral feeling, or distractions, or delusion, whatever you want to call it, and then the right view can arise. Keep in mind that it is quite advanced if you want to do that. It can be too much to bear at first, because it will feel a bit like dying. So be careful when you try to perform this kind of meditation. But if you have been practicing Buddhism and enduring and restraint for a long time and have been keeping the precepts, then the mind should be ready. Otherwise, it can be deeply uncomfortable. But anyway, this should be enough for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to put them down below. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.